This episode of Capes and Lunatic Sidekicks is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Hey everyone, it's Phil and Lilith again, back for another Ultimate Spider Cast. As I said last time, we may have a special guest, and we do! Ladies and gentlemen, legendary artist for Marvel and DC, Mr. Ron Frenz. How you doing, Ron?
Hello everybody. Thank you very much for the warm welcome.
Yay! And I know I kind of jumped around last time, but we're focusing this time on some of Ron's Spider-Man work, specifically the Hobgoblin stuff. Lilith, what was that? Uh-oh. You're kind of low. Uh-oh. All right. Lilith, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Yeah, I couldn't hear her for a while there either.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Miss Lilith Hellfire?
I said, we can't talk Spider-Girl?
Oh, we can, but I know we've been focusing on Hobgoblin the last few episodes. But yeah, no, if you have Spider-Girl questions, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we can do the Hobgoblin stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's in, well, if you haven't been following, because it's posting in November, Thanksgiving, so we've kind of just been doing the Hobgoblin.
Yeah, our Hobgobble, I know.
See? That's clever. I like that. That's very clever.
But yeah, last episode we were talking, we talked like your first regular issue of Amazing 251. That seemed like a really fun issue, probably the draw for your first regular issue, because it was like mostly like an all-action issue.
Yeah, actually, that's very insightful. That was indeed true, that you got to come in. John Romita Jr. got to do all the setup, and I basically got to do the big final fight. Yeah, so it was fun. Yeah.
I don't know. I've heard this online. So again, I don't know if it's true, but when Roger Stern left the book, did Tom ask him? You know, Mr. Tom DeFalco, did he ask him who he had in mind for the Hobgoblin?
Yes.
Okay. And Tom
not immediately, but he did indeed ask him, and was told that it was oh, help me, I'm an old man.
Oh, Roderick Kingsley.
Roderick Kingsley, and and Tom didn't completely understand what the subtleties of what Roger was going for. Although I, not surprisingly, have to, as much as I love Roger, I have to side with Tom on this. Roger's point is that the Kingsleys are not twins.
Mm.
That they look enough alike that they can fool people, but they're not literally twins, and that I just find that really hard to believe. And he would have spent more time building the mystery and doing more scenes like the ones he did seed. But by the time he was leaving the title, and there was no real crisis or conspiracy that had Roger leaving the title, the fact that he and Danny Fingeroth had worked together before, and Roger just didn't feel that that Danny Fingeroth's editing style and Roger's writing style, dovetailed really well. He just felt that he would be driving Danny crazy and vice versa. And it was a good time with JR leaving. It was a good time for him to be leaving. He has flattered me by saying that if he had known that I was going to be the choice for penciler, he might have hung around long enough to wrap up the Hobgoblin stuff. But I think that's just him being very nice. But anyway, he made the decision to leave the title. It was his decision to make. He made it. So Danny's first duty as editor was to find a new writer, and he tapped Tom to do it. Of course, Tom's first 2 issues were scripted over Roger's plots. What was the question? Oh, yes. And Tom did indeed ask him, who is the Hobgoblin? And Roger's answer, being a professional writer, was, well, I was planning on making it Roderick Kingsley's brother, but you can make it whoever you want because you're the new writer. And at one point I asked Tom, so who was Roger planning on making it? And Tom kind of, cavalierly said, it's going to be Roderick. It was going to be Roderick Kingsley's evil twin, which, and Roger denies that he would have said it that way because that's not the way he saw it. Mm-hmm. But he acknowledges that that's the way Tom put it to me. And I said, is that who we're going to make it? And he goes, oh, unfortunately, I don't think there was enough seated. I don't think that plays fair for the audience because I don't think there were enough clues for anybody to conceivably have guessed that, and quite ironically, that happened with us, because who Tom wanted to make the Hobgoblin, once Danny Fingeroth had moved off the title and Jim Owsley had come on the title as editor, Tom was trying to put scenes in to set up who he wanted to be the Hobgoblin, and who he had felt had already been suggested, and he wanted to do more scenes setting up the reveal so it would play fair with the reader. And those scenes kept getting cut by the editor, who didn't know why those scenes were in there. And Tom didn't want to tell the editor who he was intending on making it because he didn't feel that was, a good idea. He figured as few people would know as possible, and on and on and on. And it became very messed up. There were egos involved. There was, shenanigans involved. There was all kinds of ridiculousness going on. A little bit of backstabbing, a little bit of ridiculousness that went on once Jim Owsley was running the show. Actually, Glenn Greenberg, who's an assistant editor on the Hobgoblin Lives project, did a really wonderful article for Back Issue Magazine a few years back that interviewed all the principals and basically took Jim Owsley's blog. He didn't want to be interviewed, but he was able to take Jim's blog as Jim's testimony, if you will, to what was going on at the time, and did a wonderfully complete overview of the entire Hobgoblin mess, which undeniably is what it turned into over the years. Yes.
So once Tom found out who the Hobgoblin was supposed to be, did he let you in from as soon as he found out?
Yeah, he told me immediately who Roger said it was. And then we, I'll be honest with you. I mean, when you're running a mystery like this, when you decide to start a mystery, you don't always know how the mystery is going to end. Mm-hmm. When we had in Thor, for a period of time, we had we set up several mysteries there. We set up the mystery of Blood Axe. We set up the mystery of who's in the bag in hell. I mean, these are odd references for people that might not have read this stuff. But when you set up a mystery, you have an idea where you're going, but you want to keep it fluid, because if all the fans guess along the way, you don't want them to be right. They don't want to be right. So you have to keep it open and fluid to possible changes in case, too many people guess it, or somebody gives it up, or something happens along the way that would change the direction of your story. Oh, and you have to keep it open for better ideas, So we talked about who we thought it should be. Tom decided who he thought it should be. And he was the character that he was hoping to do more setup with was the Kingpin's son, Richard Fisk, who had been the schemer at one point. That's who Tom intended for Hobgoblin to be in our storyline, which never happened. He was planning on using Roderick Kingsley as the Rose.
Oh.
The Rose was conceived as being a character that Tom was surprised when people wondered who the Rose was, because to Tom, the Rose was just one of these middle management thugs that wore a mask, and he didn't realize that would be a question, who the Rose is, that kind of thing. But those were his two ideas, and neither one of them ever came to fruition. So, that's the way the biz works. I mean, when writers change, when editors change, storylines change. That's all there is to it, really.
I do like that better. I think Roderick Kingsley would have made a better Rose, and Richard Fisk would have made a better Hobgoblin.
Well, that also would have meant that Roderick Kingsley didn't have a brother, twin or otherwise.
Yeah.
Things like that, which, would have made some of the stuff that Roger set up interesting, because Roger was deliberately doing scenes where Kingsley's personality seemed to be different. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he was more cowardly and sniveling, and in other times he was more directed and controlling. And that was Roger subtly setting up the fact that there were two of them. There was a reference earlier, right before Roger left the title, there was a reference to Roderick saying, "I wish my brother were here."
Yes.
Which was actually Daniel posing as Roderick, saying he was wishing Roderick was there, it's crazy, because a lot of people's concepts change and mutate along the way, and this was definitely one of those. I mean, I would have been perfectly happy with Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin, but my idea to put a twist on it would be that the reader would find out before Peter Parker found out.
Yes.
And then you would be, you'd be putting them in situations where Pete's spider sense would be going off and he wouldn't know why, and that Pete, the reader would feel the jeopardy that Pete were in. So that was another possibility that was talked about. In fact, when Jim Owsley pushed Tom to tell him who you planning on making the Hobgoblin, Tom didn't trust Owsley creatively. So even though his intention was to make it Richard Fisk, he told Owsley Ned Leeds.
Oh.
And then Owsley went ahead and kind of proved his trustworthiness or lack thereof by having Ned Leeds killed in the Spider-Man Wolverine thing before, thinking that was Tom's choice for the Hobgoblin. He killed him off. Mm-hmm. And when Peter David says when he asked Owsley why he did it, he said he did it to piss off Tom DeFalco, to upend Tom DeFalco's story. That's what Peter said. That's firsthand from Peter David, who was told that at lunch with Jim Owsley. So, that's the story as it's been reported to me.
So that's why Peter David. That's why Peter David revealed Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin in Amazing.
Well, he then became enlisted by Owsley to fix it, basically, and come up with somebody for the Hobgoblin to be. Apparently, Owsley's intent at that point was to make the Hobgoblin the Foreigner, which was a character that Peter David had created. And Peter David said, that doesn't work. 6 Ways from Sunday, that doesn't work. So he goes, well, then you come up with who it is. And then Peter came up with the idea to basically posthumously make Ned Leeds the Hobgoblin, even though he was killed. And that led to the crazy stuff with Jack-O-Lantern becoming the new Hobgoblin, and on and on and on, which just got more and more convoluted. And pretty much every year since Roger had left the title, he had pitched, after he saw what other people were doing with it, after he had seen what Owsley had done with it and everything, Roger was pitching Hobgoblin Lives to different editors, and a lot of people thought, too much time had passed, it wasn't worth doing. But Tom Brevoort and Glenn Greenberg, who were big supporters of Rogers and Rogers' original concept, where they bit and they said, yeah, okay, you show us something. And Roger wrote the 3-issue Hobgoblin Lives miniseries, and they called John Romita Jr., and he was unavailable at the time, and being a superstar, and they called me, and I was thrilled that I was asked, and I was more than happy to make some time for a Spider-Man project, and especially working with Roger. So I said yes, and we got going on it, and I was impressed with what Roger did. I thought he structured it really well as a self-contained mystery story. He reintroduced, all the suspects from years before, and none of them had been used by other writers, so everybody was still pretty much in play. And I thought it was a pretty solid 3-issue story that got the Hobgoblin back to where Roger had intended him. And we actually used Hobgoblin and Spider-Girl as Roderick Kingsley. We used him as a badass villain from Mayday's dad's Rogues Gallery, who basically came to the MC2 universe, not literally, but he kind of came to Mayday's world and started hurting people. So we kind of used him as the darkness from the 616, kind of tainting our bright little MC2 world a little bit, So yeah, it was fun using him as Roderick Kingsley and as this badass from Pete's history, So I like the character, which is good because I get asked to draw him a lot. A lot of my commissions are still Hobgoblin. I sometimes I feel like I'm more related to Hobgoblin than John Romita Jr. is, and he co-created and designed the character. So.
Yeah, but you've probably drawn the Hobgoblin more than any other artist, right?
It's possible. But like I said, JR designed him, and JR did the initial stories, and the fact that we came on board and we're playing out the mystery. I understand why I'm associated with him, but and then coming back to do Hobgoblin Lives, I guess that kind of cinched that deal. So when I'm asked to do commissions, quite often they involve the Hobgoblin. That and the black costume for Spider-Man, which again I didn't design it. I just happened to be there when it was introduced.
Lilith, I feel like I'm dominating the conversation.
No, you're good. This is great story stuff. I love it.
I had an artistic question though. Was it like did you enjoy it, or was it a pain in the butt, like, always having to hide the Hobgoblin's face when his mask wasn't on for how many issues?
I enjoyed it. The ridiculousness of it is that when you don't know who it, when you yourself don't know who it is, the challenge is to make it as generic as possible without completely cheating the reader. That becomes the challenge, if there is one, to drawing silhouettes. Is that when we did Blood Axe, we weren't sure that initially who we were going to make the character. So luckily, most of the time it was during cold winter months. So even though it ended up being a woman, we were covered by pants and coats, and in the 90s, pants were kind of pleated and a little wider and all that kind of stuff. So there were plenty of ways with collars up and everything for me to camouflage who we were showing in silhouette, that kind of thing. And nobody called us on it, so that was good. I guess that's one sign of success, is if the readers don't revolt when it's finally revealed, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I also had great teachers in Steve Ditko and John Romita Sr. who had to do it for a while with Green Goblin as well. So they came up with all kinds of different ways. Even Mary Jane was originally introduced with a plant in front of her face. So comics knows what they're doing when it comes to hiding people's identities, I guess.
Oh yeah. Lilith, questions?
No, I thought it's just funny that you start to run kind of on the Hobgoblin to get off. That's all.
Lilith, you're fading out. Lilith.
Was there a question in there? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah, she got kind of low. Lilith?
I was asking about two. It's like exactly it's Hobgoblin, and then they asked you to introduce a new villain as well.
Oh, Lilith, I'm having trouble here. Hobgoblin and then a new villain. What? Oh, man. Technical difficulties, Lilith. Lilith. All right. Well, I guess I'll keep going. Ron, so there was never any serious talk of J. Jonah Jameson being the Hobgoblin?
No.
Not
with us.
Yeah,
not with us. I'm Roger conceived the character and seemed to have a pretty good idea from fairly early on that it was going to be Roderick Kingsley, who he had introduced in the Peter Parker series, and Falco and I never seriously considered that either. No, J. Jonah's too valuable of a character, to squander on something like that. Plus I guess it would have been an interesting twist, but I mean, we had plenty of other suspects at the time. You got to remember, back in the 80s, we actually had supporting characters.
Oh, yeah.
We actually had supporting casts, which unfortunately seems to have gone the way of the dodo to some degree. Although I'm speaking out of school because I'm not regularly reading anything right now. There may be plenty of books with supporting casts. I don't know. But yeah, and there were some supporting characters that were created, for the purpose of being suspects. So that's also true. I mean, that's one thing about being a writer is you're limited only by your imagination and your editor. That always helps.
And
you can create your suspects.
Yeah. And was the length of the story was that first Roger but then Tom's idea, or was editorial telling him, oh no, hey, stretch it out a little bit? Or
well, Roger's original concept was to take it one issue longer than the original Green Goblin mystery ran, which I'm not sure exactly. I mean, he has stated in interviews that was his original intention, was to take it as long as they did the mystery of the Green Goblin and take it one issue further and then reveal it. I don't think Tom and I had any kind of a timeline, to tell you the truth. As long as we could keep it fresh and keep some twists, because occasionally we would have the Hobgoblin kind of fade into the background when he framed. Roger had done the story where he had framed Lefty Donovan, and everybody thought he was Lefty Donovan and was killed. Mm-hmm. And then we did a sequence where he framed Flash Thompson as the Hobgoblin.
Yeah.
And after each of those frames, he tended to recede into the shadows a little bit and lay low while people assumed that the Hobgoblin was somebody else, that kind of thing. So given that, the mystery could have been carried on almost indefinitely under a skilled writer. We didn't have any intention to have it go on indefinitely, but because of what ended up happening, none of our original intentions ended up happening at all. So,
I mean, yeah, even after your first full issue, I mean, everyone thought the Hobgoblin was dead, and then the whole black suit thing came up, so that probably prolonged it for another, year?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the Hobgoblin's the type of character, even if you don't know who he is, you can have some fun with the mystery occasionally and have him lay low, especially after he's framed somebody. It makes sense if you've framed Flash Thompson and he's in jail for it, that you're not going to go flying around as the Hobgoblin, because you're going to let people think that was him. And that's kind of how we were seeing it, that we didn't feel like we were under any real pressure to reveal it on any kind of a timetable for that reason,
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure have you heard from Peter David at all? Because I believe he's doing a mini series. I think set in that timeline. At the time Peter had that alien costume, and I think he's bringing in the Hobgoblin for that story.
No, I've seen that they're doing symbiote Spider-Man mini arcs and stuff. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read any of them, but I'm sure that whatever Peter does, he's going to look at what was going on in the meantime and check the timeline. I don't think I'm kind of speaking out of school because I don't know who the editor of that project is, but I have found that a lot of editors these days aren't overly concerned with the continuity of the past.
Yeah.
I could cite several projects. I won't, but I could cite a few projects I'm aware of and some I've even worked on that just didn't seem to be concerned in the slightest about whether or not their retelling of history was accurate. And given that, they're entertaining a completely different set of readers, to a certain degree, I can understand, why let history interfere with what you think is a good story right now, that kind of thing. I can get behind that argument to a certain degree, but I've always found that it's not really continuity that people are looking for. It's consistency.
Yeah.
And then those are two slightly different things. But I would not be a slave to continuity, and I have no problem if you come up with a clever way to say that a story that happened before didn't quite happen the way we think it did, as long as it's consistent with what was told, with the quote-unquote facts of the story that they were originally told. I don't tend to have a problem with that. But, so you can play with continuity as long as it's consistent.
Do you think sometimes, like, some of the higher-ups are, like, scared of continuity because they're like, oh, are we going to get new readers if we're mentioning stuff that happened, like, 20, 30 years ago?
Sure. I think everybody has their own opinion about how that kind of works. And if some of the people... I think Joe Quesada was even quoted at one point when he first became editor-in-chief. I believe he was even quoted at one point that they weren't going to let continuity keep them from telling a really good story. And there were actually a lot of stories that were told in the years following that statement that kind of exploded continuity in the hopes of, getting a really good story out of it. And that people have to decide for themselves whether there were really good stories told after that. But certainly the consistency of certain characters and the continuity of certain characters have been sacrificed over the years. And, like I said, I'm not a real continuity advocate or I'm not crazy about, I'm not insane about continuity being what it is. I think if you're doing a comic based on the history of the character, it's one of those things where those books have been printed and those books will be reprinted. So I think you have a certain obligation to make sure that the story you're telling is consistent with what was in print before. Mm-hmm. Because if you retell, something from the life of Spider-Man, or if you retell something from the life of Iron Man or any character, fill in the blank. If you retell the life of retell a scene, and it's completely different from the scene that a reader can go and look up or is going to be reprinted in trade paperback next month, I think you're doing a disservice to your audience. Mm-hmm. So that's not just about holding on to the older readers or trading younger readers for older readers or anything. It's also just being consistent to your catalog.
Oh yeah.
Because if that scene, if you decide you're going to do, for some reason you're going to go back and say that Spider-Man was never able to lift all that weight off of him in that classic Ditko scene, and there was another character helping him, people are going to go, wait a minute, what? Because we've all seen that scene. That scene is, part of the history of the character.
I get not being a slave of the continuity, but it's just, when people play fast and easy with history, I'm just like, what about that great story, Tom and Ron did, Peter and the Hobgoblin?
Well, I was even, as I said, I was even part of something like that. There was a title that ran for a while as Marvel Knights title called Four. It was just called Four. It was the Marvel Knights Fantastic Four title.
Oh, yeah.
And it was written by Roberto Segarra Casa. I believe I'm saying his name right. I hope I'm saying his name right. Very talented writer that was hired for his fact that he was a writer outside of the comics field and everything. And he decided that he was going to tell a story that was placed in continuity when the Fantastic Four first met T'Challa, the Black Panther, in Wakanda. Okay? And in the course of his story, Reed was ignoring poor Sue in favor of science and was telling her she was being a silly girl, and he was too busy to deal with her right then, even though they were in the beautiful romantic African veldt, and she was so she was wandering around the palace in her bathrobe, and she ran into T'Challa playing the piano, and T'Challa was incredibly charming, and they go to a hidden lake somewhere, and they swim naked together, and it suggested that something could have happened between T'Challa and Susie, but it didn't, that kind of thing. But if you go back and you go to the Fantastic Four timeline and you go and read those issues, Reed and Sue are all over each other.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's actually a scene where they're introducing the Wakandans to baseball, and Reed and Sue run off into the bushes together, and Ben goes, "Well, I guess we've lost our team," that kind of thing. So it doesn't wash, it doesn't play. But they were so convinced that their story was worth telling that instead of looking for another place in Marvel continuity where it might have worked, because there were plenty of times where Reed was being a dick to Sue, I mean, pick another one, because that just didn't work. So, there are moments like that it happens, and, the readers who like the new story, and the readers who like the old story say, well, that was stupid, and you move on, that kind of thing. I drew the flashback sequences, and I'm like, none of this works. It's ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't play because it's not the way it's quote unquote not the way it happened in the original books. So, of course, recognizing that I'm going to be turning 60 years old next year, and it's a ridiculous conversation for a grown man to be having, talking about comic book stories and whether or not they really happened or not. But anyway,
well, it's your career,
Yeah, I've paid my rent with it for long enough that I guess I'm entitled. Yeah.
People could say some of us fans are a little crazy, but I mean, when you make your living at it, it helps to be up on all this, on your history.
Well, it just occasionally occurs to us how ridiculous. I mean, I have conversations with Tom DeFalco that, we'll get to a point in the conversation where it gets a little heated or it gets a little passionate, and then we just start laughing because, it's ridiculous. But yes, it tends to happen even more with fans because fans have that incredibly personal investment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I try to take it seriously on Facebook, especially. I never tell fans to get a life because these people are, have spent time paying my rent. So I'm not going to offend their love of the character or their investment in the characters because that's what we work for. We hope that the stories we tell and the way we tell them are compelling enough that people get involved and become invested in the characters. If they don't, then the book gets canceled. We're out of work.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody go check out Ron Frenz's Facebook page. There's always, great art going on there. You can strike up a conversation with Ron.
Oh, I would. I love to answer questions. Sometimes people ask questions that have just been answered or can be answered in other ways. Sometimes I wait and give other fans a few days to answer the question if it's answerable. But if somebody asks me about process or tools or, background, I mean, I'm not going to badmouth other creators. I just refuse to do that. It makes me sad when I see other creators feeling the need to shit talk other people. That I think is bad for the industry, and I don't think it helps the fans at all.
Yeah.
Because blame gets very cancerous. I mean, it gets to the point where you just start, writing off different ideas and everything. I mean, hopefully we're all in this together, and the creative people. It always feels weird to me when somebody accuses Marvel of hating the fans, because without the fans, they're not there. They might be miscalculating what the fans are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
They might be making mistakes and had been wrong that they thought the fans were going to like this, but the idea that Marvel hates the fans and do things deliberately to piss them off what kind of a business model would that be?
Yeah, I always find that.
How long would you expect to stay in business if that's really the way you felt?
I always find that ridiculous because there's creators like you who love the fans, but like even Marvel, even if they despise the fans, they want to make money, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Ultimately, they need to find a middle ground where they're pleasing their fans and whatever business agenda they may have. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else would be insane. Now, I'm not a business person. I know there have been mistakes made with the comics industry. I wish the comics industry were as healthy now as it was when I got into it. But it's not. And that's just a simple fact of the day. Sales are not what they used to be and everything, but there are a lot of people who feel that comics are as healthy now as they've been in a while. And if that is indeed true, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. I'm reading about comic shops going out of business all the time.
Yeah, but is that just like the age of digital too? I mean, any printed medium is probably down, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that is, believe me, it's above my pay grade. I am not Gates. I'm not Bill Gates. I'm not a businessman, so I really don't know how that all plays into it. If somebody asked me to make decisions so other people could make money, I would be the wrong guy to talk to. I have enough trouble paying my own rent.
All right. I'll let you go in a little bit, but all right, two things. One, all right, to sum this up, is Hobgoblin your favorite villain that you've worked on?
Probably not.
Okay. Oh, would it be Blood Axe?
No, I was going to say,
would it be Blood Axe?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, he's
fun to draw.
Spider-Man is probably ultimately my favorite character, but if I had to pick my favorite villain, I don't think I would pick Hobgoblin. That would be too easy.
Would it be Blood Axe?
It could be. It depends on how specific you're getting. I mean, at one point, a commissioner asked me. In fact, he's asked me to do a second one of just my favorite hero versus my favorite villain. And the first one I did, there's just too many to name. So instead of just doing Spider-Man versus fill in the blank, I did Thunderstrike versus Blood Axe. But again, it's just because I've been reading comics. I don't read a lot now, but from the time I was 6 or 7 to the time I was, 50, I was reading comics all the time, and I have many, many, many favorite characters for different reasons, and a lot of favorite villains too. Some of whom I've even co-created and worked on. Yeah, but it's kind of cheap. They're all my babies. I couldn't pick ones of the ones I've co-created, but I don't know whether they would rise above other characters. I would be hard pressed to necessarily pick. As far as like just a good foe for Spider-Man, do I pick Kraven or do I pick Puma? That kind of thing, because they're very different characters. Puma's kind of an anti-hero, that kind of thing. Kraven is a nut bar who hunts people. So, but I love the classic characters. Anytime I get a chance, I default to the classic characters that I maybe didn't get to draw when I was actually on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way we could get a question or two out of Lilith? Could she text you or something? Or
she just told me to keep going on. Because she just said she was enjoying the interview. But yeah, I didn't see any questions out of her. So
okay.
But I was gonna say before I let you go, I'd love to have you back in December to talk about this, but we should mention it anyway so people go out and buy it. The Thor special that's coming up in December.
Yeah, it was one of the many specials that they're doing for the 80th anniversary of Marvel, called Thor the Worthy. It's a one-shot. I believe it's due out very early in December, and it has 3 stories in it. It's got a Beta Ray Bill story with Beta Ray Bill and Sif, written by Walt Simonson and inked by Sal Buscema. I don't have it in front of me right now, so I don't remember the penciler's name is in the solicitations, but I apologize to him. I've forgotten his name. And then there's a 10-page Thunderstrike story by Tom DeFalco and myself, inked by Keith Williams. Al Milgram was unable to help us out because he just had hand surgery. So we got Keith Williams to step in and do a wonderful job with the inks. And the third story is what is the third story? It's a Jane Foster Thor story with Sif in it. That's written by the team of people who actually worked with the Jane Foster character and everything. So it's 10 or so page stories of people who have wielded the hammer, and it's packaged as Thor the Worthy, and it'll be out in the beginning of December. So if any Thunderstrike fans out there are interested and a little hungry, it is Eric. It's not Kevin. It's a untold tale of Eric and Code Blue taking on the Gray Gargoyle.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. DeFalco and I put our heads together. I was really not coming up with any ideas that we never got around to for Thunderstrike, and it wasn't until Tom came up with the idea of including Code Blue that we kind of were able to hammer out something, because I had an idea for years of having Code Blue go up against the Great Gargoyle. So we were able to incorporate some of that into this story. But it's basically set after Jock Jackson is killed. He was a Code Blue member that was killed in the line of duty. And this story picks up right after that event where everybody is still reeling from it. And Eric is still trying to decide if his responsibilities to Kevin don't outweigh his responsibilities as a superhero, as an Avenger. And everybody in Code Blue are having some of the same thoughts, and it kind of explores that moment in Eric's development where he had to decide whether or not to quit or stay on the horse and see how it ends. And of course, we all kind of know what decision he made, but it was a fun 10 pages. I think it'll be insightful, and Tom DeFalco can write a one-page story, so he certainly puts a lot into a 10-page story.
But yeah, like I said, I'd love to have.
I'd be happy to come back. I'd be happy to come back after it's out and discuss it with you, or take any questions you might have. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to do that. So yeah, anyone who sees this or listens to this, yeah, send me your questions. We'll, Mr. Frenz is gracious enough to come back yet again, so send your questions in.
That would not be a problem, sir.
All right.
A pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for, especially on a Saturday, for sacrificing some time on a Saturday to speak with me.
Being late afternoon like this, it was terrific. Don't worry about it, Phil. It's my pleasure. Please, going forward, please call me Ron. And thank you very much for your support and for inviting me on.